There are moments in a doctor's life that I will never forget, not because they were too complex, but because they happened too fast, too silently. That morning, I had just taken a sip of coffee when the phone rang. On the other end was the panicked voice of a woman saying her husband had collapsed in the kitchen and could no longer speak. I rushed to their home, and the first thing I saw was Mr. Walter lying on his side on the floor, one hand still clutched to his chest, his eyes vacant, and half of his face drooping to one side. No more laughter, no more morning greetings, only faint breathing and the stunned face of his wife, standing frozen in the corner of the kitchen. Before I go on, I want you to know who I am. I'm a neurologist, with over 20 years of experience treating older adults across the United States. I used to believe I was calm enough to handle any situation. But that morning, I was truly shaken, not because Mr. Walter fell, but because of why he fell. Just 17 minutes earlier, he had taken a brain supplement gifted by a friend, followed by his usual cup of strong morning coffee. One pill that seemed helpful. One cup of coffee that felt harmless. But for a brain that's over 70 years old, that was an intense and sudden spike in pressure. I've treated many stroke cases before, but I had never seen someone collapse so suddenly after taking something so small, and the way it happened left me shaken. I don't blame Mr. Walter, because what he did is what so many people over 60 still do every day, hoping to stay sharp and healthy. But after 60, the brain doesn't need stimulation, it needs stability, rhythm, and choices that match the body's changing condition. And that's exactly why I want to share with you the full truth behind Mr. Walter's fall, so that none of us have to witness something similar when it can still be prevented. When I stepped into Mr. Walter's home, what struck me first wasn't the emergency itself, but a strange and haunting silence. The kitchen lights were still on, the coffee cup on the table still steaming, but on the floor lay the still figure of a man, collapsed on his side. He wasn't unconscious, nor fully awake. It was a suspended state. His eyes were open, but not focused, his mouth twisted, and no sound came out. His wife stood against the wall, afraid to approach, as if something immense had just happened, but there were no words yet to describe it. I knelt beside him and softly called his name twice. There was no response, only a confused gaze and a hand slowly curling on one side of his body. I knew this scene all too well. A part of the brain had just been injured. And if we didn't act fast, the first thing to go would be language. We rushed him to the hospital, and an MRI scan revealed a small hemorrhage near the speech motor center on the left side of his brain. That's why he couldn't speak, not because he wasn't aware, but because the signal from his brain no longer reached his words. And what pained me most was that Mr. Walter had been completely healthy before that moment. No high blood pressure, no history of stroke, no obvious warning signs. His wife told us that morning he woke up cheerful, checked his blood pressure, it was normal, went for a 10-minute walk in the garden, then came in to prepare breakfast. That breakfast had only just begun with a single brain supplement pill and his usual strong coffee, something he had been doing for about 2 weeks. That pill contained a high dose of Ginkgo biloba, a common herbal extract believed to enhance brain circulation and often used by older adults. But here's what many don't realize: after the age of 60, the blood vessels in the brain are no longer as elastic as they once were. They're thinner, more fragile, and more prone to rupture under sudden pressure. Caffeine in coffee constricts blood vessels and raises heart rate. Ginkgo, on the other hand, dilates vessels and increases blood flow to the brain. Together, they form a dangerous combination that few people recognize. When those two opposing effects happen at once, weakened brain vessels can't adapt quickly enough. Tiny capillaries may rupture or leak under pressure. In Mr. Walter's case, it was a small tear deep within the left hemisphere, not fatal, but enough to rob him of his ability to speak for weeks, maybe longer. And the saddest part? Everything he did came from good intentions, not recklessness. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. He ate well, slept on time. But one seemingly harmless supplement and one familiar cup of coffee brought his brain to its knees. I couldn't help but wonder if someone had told him earlier that not every brain supplement is safe, would that morning have passed just like any other? I don't blame Mr. Walter. And I don't blame anyone else doing the same because I know it all comes from sincere belief. But belief, when not grounded in knowledge, can cause harm. And the brain is not like any other organ, it doesn't heal as easily. You can bandage a skin wound. You can realign a dislocated joint. But you can't stitch back together a word lost to a brain hemorrhage. I share this story not to frighten, but to remind you that even a small moment of caution each morning can save a whole lifetime of clarity afterward. When we understand what our brain truly needs and what quietly harms it, we are taking one of the most loving actions we can give ourselves. From Mr. Walter's case, I began to recognize something I had once overlooked myself. There are so many mistakes older adults repeat every day, under the belief that they're taking good care of their health. These mistakes don't come from carelessness. They stem from trust, kindness, and an unspoken fear of aging. The first and most common mistake: taking supplements without consulting a doctor. People trust ginkgo biloba, fish oil, ginseng, memory boosters, all because they've heard so many glowing recommendations. What they don't realize is that the wrong kind of brain booster, in an aging body, can disrupt the delicate balance of brain circulation. After age 60, the liver detoxes more slowly, the kidneys filter more slowly, and brain blood vessels become more fragile, making nutrient absorption far more risky. I once treated an elderly man in Minnesota who took 4 different supplements every morning. One day, he fainted in the bathroom from a sudden drop in blood pressure. What worried me wasn't the fall but how innocently he asked me, "Doctor, am I not taking enough? Should I add more?" It took a long conversation for him to understand that maybe what his brain needed wasn't more pills but less pressure from misplaced trust. The second mistake: drinking coffee on an empty stomach, especially right after taking supplements. Caffeine speeds up the heart and constricts blood vessels. Combine that with something like ginkgo, which dilates vessels, and you get a dangerous tug of war. An older brain doesn't adapt quickly to such conflicting forces, and it only takes a few minutes of imbalance for blood flow to falter. I remember a woman in Texas who took her clarity pills every morning, followed by a strong cup of coffee, thinking it helped her memory stay sharp like in her youth. Until one day, she collapsed near her garden bench after losing balance and struggling to speak because the blood flow to her brain couldn't keep up. The third mistake: ignoring the small signs, assuming they're just normal aging. One moment of slurred speech, a fleeting numbness in the hand, a second of blurry vision, all brushed off as nothing to worry about. I once treated an elderly man in Boston who told me he only mixed up words when tired. But scans showed he'd experienced at least 3 minor strokes in 1 month. The brain doesn't scream when it's injured, it whispers. And if we don't listen, those whispers turn into silence. The fourth mistake: believing advertisements instead of listening to your own body. You'll hear claims like, 1 pill a day for all-day memory, stay sharp without meds, rejuvenate your brain in 7 days. But memory doesn't work like a light switch. It's built from sleep, nutrition, movement, emotions, and human connection. I once told an elderly woman, "Your brain isn't lacking pills, it's craving to be heard. It needs slow mornings, free of pressure." The final mistake, and one too many people over 60 make, is trying to do too much at once, hoping to hang on to youth. They take more supplements, exercise more, read more, add more, all without realizing that this constant more may be overloading the brain. The brain doesn't like rushing. It thrives on rhythm: steady, predictable, gentle repetition, and moments of rest. I once met an older man in San Diego who told me, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm afraid of losing my mind. That's why I take everything I can." And I simply placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Maybe what you need most is to slow down, and start again with something simpler." Panic over memory loss often drives us to act quickly, but in medicine, haste rarely leads to lasting results. And like Mr. Walter, many are caring for their brains with sincerity but doing it the wrong way. Not out of bad intentions, but from a lack of understanding. If you've done any of the things I mentioned, please don't blame yourself. Millions of people are doing the same, every single day. But after today, if we know what harms us, we can avoid it. And if we avoid it, we can live in peace with our brains for much longer. One of the things that weighs on me most is knowing how many strokes could have been prevented if only the early signs had been heard in time. A stroke rarely strikes like lightning. It usually begins quietly, through subtle and fleeting signs often dismissed or ignored. The first warnings might only last a few minutes, cause no pain, trigger no panic, but they are enough for the brain to speak up. I once met an elderly woman in Seattle who, while peeling an apple, suddenly stuttered 3 words in a row, then laughed it off thinking she had just misspoken. But only a week later, she had a real stroke and lost her ability to speak for nearly 3 months. So if you've ever found yourself suddenly unable to finish a full sentence even for just a few seconds, don't treat it as something small. That's the brain's way of saying, I'm not getting enough blood. Please pay attention to me. Some people also report that, out of nowhere, everything starts to look foggy then clears up again within seconds. But natural vision doesn't change that quickly, only the brain's blood supply can do that. If you've ever experienced flickering light or temporary blurriness in one eye, even briefly, take it seriously. It's not just eye fatigue. I once examined an elderly man in Colorado who said he'd been blinded by light 3 times while standing up. Turns out, they were brief spasms in the blood vessels of the occipital lobe. After such moments, stop what you're doing, breathe deeply, and make a mental note of the time. That's how you protect yourself. Another common symptom is numbness or tingling on one side of the face or body, like light pins and needles or a soft electric wave. Many people think it's just bad posture, but if the feeling only happens on one side, comes suddenly, and fades within minutes, it's not random. Numbness on one side is a classic sign of temporary blood shortage to one brain hemisphere and often overlooked because it doesn't last. Please remember, if that sensation has ever happened to you even just once, it was already the brain's first and only warning. There are also mornings when older adults feel a bit dizzy upon standing, take a few steps, and feel unsteady or off balance. Don't assume it's just poor sleep or an empty stomach. A brief loss of balance could mean the cerebellum isn't getting enough oxygen. If you've ever walked off course, lost your orientation briefly, or needed to grab a table to stay steady, don't overlook that detail. I recommend keeping a small notebook next to your bed. Each morning, jot down how you feel the moment you stand up. That's your brain's silent health journal. Finally, if a headache comes on suddenly, intensely, and feels different from any headache you've had before, seek help immediately. A new kind of headache, especially with drowsiness, fatigue, or slurred speech, isn't just stress, it could mean pressure is building in the brain. I once treated an elderly woman in Sacramento who told me, it's just a weird headache, like someone squeezing both my temples, and the next day she couldn't write her own name. We're often taught to endure pain, but with the brain, especially in older age, any new or sharp pain deserves our full attention. I understand many people don't want to bother their children, or don't want to complain too much, but please remember, silence can be the most dangerous thing. We don't need to be afraid, we just need to be cautious. Because the smallest signs from the brain today could be what saves our future tomorrow. If you've ever experienced moments like these, stuttering, blurry vision, facial numbness, imbalance, or strange headaches, go get checked. Share the details. Don't wrap it up as just getting old. Because the brain doesn't need us to be silently strong, it needs to be listened to with love. And if we hear that whisper in time, we won't have to run and panic when it falls silent forever. If there's one thing I hope older adults remember each morning, it's this: don't let a familiar habit become a burden on your brain's blood vessels. Breakfast is a highly sensitive time. After many hours of sleep, your blood pressure begins to regulate, your blood sugar shifts, and cerebral circulation starts to increase. This is also when any kind of stimulation, even small, can have a stronger impact than usual, especially for brains that have weathered more than 60 springs. I once treated an elderly gentleman in San Jose who had a daily habit of drinking strong black coffee on an empty stomach along with a high-dose fish oil capsule. After 2 weeks of this routine, he started feeling dizzy when stepping outside, lost balance while walking backward, and thought it was just part of aging. But in reality, those were signs of cerebral circulation reacting to a morning pressure shock he didn't even realize he was giving himself. The brain doesn't oppose coffee, nor does it resist supplements, but it must be protected from sudden, uncontrolled surges. If you still want your morning coffee, please eat something beforehand. Even just a slice of toast, a few spoonfuls of oatmeal, or a banana can help cushion your stomach and stabilize your blood pressure. I always recommend my patients begin the day with 2 glasses of warm water. It gently jumpstarts circulation and wakes up the nervous system. And after that, give your body a few quiet minutes to fully awaken before introducing any stimulus, even if it's just a cup of coffee. For older adults, a simple breakfast that avoids sudden spikes in blood sugar and pressure is absolutely essential. Here's what I recommend as an ideal breakfast: a boiled egg, a few slices of avocado or walnuts, a piece of whole grain toast, and a small bowl of berries like blueberries or wild strawberries. If you prefer porridge, try oatmeal with a little flaxseed and don't add too much sugar. Fast sugar causes rapid blood swings that can tire out your brain. Avoid quick and easy breakfasts like packaged pastries, colorful sugary cereals, or bottled fruit juices. They trigger blood sugar spikes and crashes, making your brain feel sluggish and foggy by mid-morning. One more note: don't take brain supplements before checking your morning blood pressure. Because if your pressure is already elevated, that circulation-boosting pill might end up pushing too much blood to the brain too fast. I once met a woman in Orange County who took Ginkgo biloba, then went for a brisk walk because she wanted her blood to flow better, and ended up with a pounding headache within 15 minutes. You don't need an elaborate breakfast. But you do need one that understands your body, especially a body over 60, which needs to warm up slowly like a vintage car. If breakfast is food for the mind, then don't force feed it something too intense while it's still catching its breath after a long night's rest. I often tell my patients, if you care about your brain, begin your morning with a kind breakfast, not rushed, not forceful, not a battle against your own blood pressure. Think of breakfast as your way of greeting your brain, and that greeting should be gentle, slow, and soft enough to carry you safely through the day. After everything I've shared, what I hope you carry with you is not fear but hope. Because there is still so much we can do to protect our brain, and the best part is, none of it is complicated. No new medications, no special devices, no advanced knowledge, just a small right start to each morning. I call it the 7-day gentle brain reset. One small change a day, meaningful when practiced consistently. Day 1. Start by drinking 2 glasses of warm water right after waking up, one to awaken your circulation, the other to ease pressure in the brain's vessels. This gentle habit helps thin the blood, promotes steady blood flow to the brain, and eases stiffness in the joints as you begin your day. Day 2. Try not to check your phone or read the news for the first 30 minutes of the day. Give your brain space to breathe, to awaken naturally, and to lead its rhythm rather than being pulled by outside noise too early. Day 3. Aim to eat at least 3 different colors of fruits or vegetables during the day, not a lot, just variety. The more vibrant and natural the color, the richer it is in antioxidants and nutrients that quietly clean inflammation from the brain's blood vessels. Day 4. Call someone you haven't spoken to in a while, a friend, a relative, a neighbor. Social connection activates the brain, boosts healthy neurotransmitters, reduces loneliness, and slows memory decline. Day 5. Take 5 minutes before bed to write down 3 things you were grateful for today. This calms the hippocampus, the memory center, and helps you sleep deeper, which supports memory renewal overnight. Day 6. Instead of trying to remember everything, use sticky notes or a notepad to give your brain room to focus on what truly matters. When your mind isn't weighed down by clutter, it can think more clearly and hold on to important thoughts longer. Day 7. Give yourself a slow morning, no alarm, no rush, no pressure to do anything for anyone. Just breathe. Sit in the sunlight. And gently remind yourself, I'm alive. I'm present. I deserve peace of mind. You don't need to memorize every step. Just choose one that feels right to start with, then add another each day. I don't expect you to change your whole life in one morning. I only hope your brain gets loved back, patiently and gently. Because the brain doesn't need grand campaigns, it needs softness, routine, warmth, like how we care for a plant each day. And if you still don't know where to start, begin with a warm glass of water tomorrow morning. That alone is enough for a gentle beginning. I know that by this age, you've been through enough to understand that nothing in life is certain, not even your health. But the one thing I truly believe is this: if we listen to our body each day, our brain will never abandon us. A pill might help a little, but a loving lifestyle is what keeps the mind sharp, the heart calm, and our memory intact. I don't expect you to change everything at once. I just hope you start with one thing, small, but consistent. A glass of water in the morning. A slower walk under the sun. A breakfast without rushing. A short call to someone you miss. And a gentle reminder to yourself, I deserve to live healthy, clear-minded, and loved every single day. I know you're not alone on this journey, because I'm here, and so are many others who are also learning to care for their brain, little by little, alongside you. If today's story touched your heart, please leave a comment, or simply write down the name of someone you want to protect starting tomorrow. Sometimes just a word or a small action from you can help someone avoid what Mr. Walter had to go through. And if possible, help me spread these messages to more people so we can not only live longer, but live with clarity. Because memory is life's greatest gift. And every morning we wake up, remembering our name, remembering our loved ones, that's a true miracle we can hold on to. If you find this video helpful, please click like, share it with someone you care about, and leave your story in the comments below so I can listen to your journey. And don't forget to subscribe to the Thrive 60 Plus channel, where we walk together through life after 60 with peace, strength, and mindfulness each day.